It is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck live on a Thursday in June. We have color coordinated today if you're watching on YouTube or on X. Both wearing black for a very hot day. Probably not our best decision. We're going to talk about Tony Mansolino and what he's done with this Orioles team since he's taken over as interim manager. We'll also talk about how the fact that the Orioles are playing better baseball right now. They're on a 5-game win streak as they are on the West Coast. And we'll do our minor league check-in to talk about the Orioles' top prospect, Samuel Basallo. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, Danielle. The Orioles are out on the West Coast. We are back here on the East Coast. We're going to talk in a little bit about the All-Star voting. We'll get into Tony Mansolino. If you're watching anywhere, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, write us a 5-star review, and I will read it out here on the show. Let's talk about the fact that the Orioles are on a 5-game win streak. They are playing a lot better. And Danielle, I think it's really as easy as it seems. Sometimes the answer to problems are what is staring right in front of you. It's Occam's razor. It's the most obvious solution. And the most obvious solution for getting this team better to me was getting the starting pitching back on track. And that is finally what we are seeing from this Orioles team.
Yeah, I mean, when you're not down 5-0 in the top of the first, it's a lot easier to win a baseball game. It's not like they're scoring more runs recently, maybe a few more here and there, but the starting pitching, it's just been so reliable. And because you're starting pitching, it's been reliable. You don't have to go to your bullpen as much. You can use only your top bullpen guys. And, wouldn't you know it, you start winning more games that way.
Yeah, I mean, it took until June for this rotation to finally stabilize, but we're seeing some massive improvements. I mean, Tomoyuki Sugano has been their most consistent, healthy starter through the first several months of the season. Zach Eflin is back. He is pitching a little bit better since his injury. Have figured himself out. But other than that, I mean, Cade Povich is a young guy who is in his first full big league season, finally figuring things out. I thought there were some shaky times in May where I thought if the Orioles have somebody else that they feel better about, maybe Chase McDermott once he got healthy or Trevor Rogers, that they might swap out Cade Povich. But last night, he was awesome against the Seattle Mariners, and we're starting to see a little bit more of Slim as opposed to Cade.
Yeah, I mean, after his last start during the last homestand, I actually wrote, is this team trying to contend? And if so, why are you still sending Cade Povich out there? Send him back to Norfolk and let him develop a little bit more and then bring him back. So it was good to see from him last night. That's the potential that the Orioles think that he has. So they are coming a long way. I think the fact that you can rely on him, even what was it, like 5 2/3 last night, something like that, 2 runs, like that is a very solid major league start from your 5th starter, from a guy who probably wouldn't be in your rotation if you had a healthy Grayson Rodriguez right now, if you had, Tyler Wells or Kyle Bradish right now. And he is showing, like he did last night, that he can step up sometimes for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an absolutely critical for this Orioles team. Perhaps the damage is done, given how many games they are still under 500, but it's at least a little bit more enjoyable to watch this team in recent weeks. All right, let's talk about the All-Star voting because phase 1 has begun. It began yesterday. The All-Star voting is just so confusing these days, Danielle. Phase 1 is just basically to try to get this down to 2 guys at each position. Obviously, you can't vote for pitchers, so we were just looking at position players. And this time last year, we were talking about, God, can the Orioles fit like 8 guys on the All-Star team? Not the same story this year. We're looking at a couple guys. And I was looking at the Orioles lineup right now, just given the fact that we've seen so much underperformance. I mean, Gunnar Henderson, if he were healthy through the first month of the season, if he were performing closer to his expectations, maybe he would be up in that conversation. Adley Rutschman is starting to swing the bat better, but obviously not having a season by Adley Rutschman's standards. So we're really only looking at Ryan O'Hearn as the top candidate. I mean, he's listed as a designated hitter, even though he can play first. He can play a little bit in the outfield. But coming into yesterday, 960 OPS, 2 WAR. He has been one of the best, one of the only really great stories for this Orioles team. And to me, he absolutely deserves to be the starter at DH as we stand here on June 5th.
Yeah, and just to, kind of clarify, all-star voting is really, really weird. It's usually a popularity contest. You're always going to see Aaron Judge get votes. You're always going to see Vlad Jr. get votes, excuse me. Those are the guys that like you can just always expect to kind of win these things at their position. But you can get in even if you aren't voted as a starter. There are MLB spots, there are player vote-ins, there are injury replacements. So even though Ryan O'Hearn is very deserving, I don't really expect him to get in through the voting just because of he's not that big name, like the other guys are. I think Jackson Holiday could get in that way because he is the big name. But I think Ryan O'Hearn definitely deserves to be an all-star. I think he very well could be the only all-star from this team this year. And I think that he deserves it. And his story is just great, how far he's come. But he's been so consistent for this team all season. He's been, the top of the lineup. And I think that he really deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, he almost made it last year. He kind of came down to that last minute replacement. And so maybe that helps increase his profile. But yeah, this was a guy that was a part-time player in Kansas City, was honestly a part-time player for his first couple years in Baltimore. And only recently have the Orioles decided to trust him just about every day against righties and lefties. And yes, he's still mashing righties way better than he's mashing lefties, but he has been a consistent presence in a lineup that has massively underperformed, and they have needed every one of his hits in this lineup. It would be great to see him make it. But like you said, it's a popularity contest, and Baltimore's a small market. The big markets show out for these votes.
But I do think what his advantage is that the player vote is a big part of it too, and getting the other spots filled in. And I think he is really well respected among his fellow players. And I think that will go a long way for him.
Absolutely. So they're getting it down to 2 at each position. Somebody who might be considered, you mentioned him, Jackson Holiday at second base. Coming into Wednesday, 0.6 WAR, according to Baseball Reference, 750 OPS. He doesn't have the best stats at second base among American League second basemen. Minnesota's Willie Castro, Seattle's Dylan Moore, Detroit's Gleyber Torres. Those 3 guys have put up better stats. It has been fun to watch Jackson Holiday's development in Baltimore, and another bright spot in this lineup. I'm just not quite sure his numbers so far have been all-star worthy, but we're still a month away from the game. A lot can happen. He could go on a heater. And the fact that he's taken over the leadoff spot and run with it has been a very, very needed positive story for this Orioles team.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows he's going to be an all-star eventually. I think he'll be on the cups this year of either making it or not making it. I don't think that he's a shoo-in by any means, but I could see him as an all-star this year. I think he has put together a pretty good first half for them.
Yeah. And then on the pitching side, something that we can't vote on, but there are a couple guys that I think maybe you could consider. I mean, one starter, one reliever. I'd say Tomoyuki Sugano in the rotation. Like I said, best starting pitcher for the Orioles so far this season when he, considering he's been healthy the entire time and Zach Eflin hasn't. 12 starts, 3.04 ERA. And then Brian Baker in the bullpen. Brian Baker, the outmaker, as some might say, has been terrific. And in a year when Felix Bautista is still getting his feet back under him post-surgery, Brian Baker has been absolutely nails in this bullpen.
Pitching selection for the All-Star game, it's really weird. You see a lot of pitchers selected and then drop out, especially some of the more veteran guys who have been there, done that, and just want their days off and don't want to put their arms through extra. So I think that kind of gives these guys on the edge a bit more of an advantage. I don't know if Sugano is necessarily all-star worthy yet, but he's put together an incredible first half for them. And I think Baker's just been consistent. You look at his stats, he's among one of the best relievers in the league right now. He is closing games for them now, which should add to his case. But I think both of those would have to be MLB additions to the team.
Yeah. If we're, knocking Mike Elias in this front office for the failures of this past offseason, and we have done plenty of that because there have been many, Tomoyuki Sugano is still a win. Getting Tomoyuki Sugano for 1 year, finding him, talking to him, deciding that he was ready to make the jump to the big leagues and finding a number that worked and getting him into their system and making it work has been an absolute win so far through the first couple months of the season.
But it is going to be a really weird all-star. Last year we were talking about how, the stars have arrived, It was Restberg, it was Adley, it was Gunnar, Santander, Burns. Like they were stacked. They had the best crew, I think, out of any other team. And this year it's like, well, they might have a guy get in that the casual baseball fan has never heard of, probably.
Yeah, and
So
obviously
very
injuries
different.
have played a large factor in that. I mean, the fact that Westberg has not been healthy has certainly hurt. Gunnar missed obviously some time and then struggled to get his feet under him. The most concerning, we've talked plenty about him on this podcast, has been Adley Rutschman. Obviously, the fact that he made 2 All-Star games in his first 2 full seasons, and then this year has taken a massive step back.
Mhm.
The fact that he's swinging the bat a lot better, and the fact that he hit a long home run last night. Andy Kuska, our coworker, talked to him about that toe tap that we've seen appear in some videos from my former coworker, Brendan Mortensen, online. And Adley has said sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not. And it's something that, he is watching carefully, and probably given the results of the last couple games, I'd say abandon the toe tap, make the hands a little bit faster. The ball, it is working out for him.
Yeah.
So to see him play a lot better, to see some of the other young guys, Heston Kjerstad, swing the bat a lot better, Kobe Mayo finally getting an opportunity and some runway with Ryan Mountcastle hurt, playing a lot better. Gunnar seems to be slowly getting back to himself. It feels like this team, the young guys, are finally getting there. They're not doing it in time for the All-Star game. And to me, that's okay. That is a secondary concern. It's just seeing these guys that you are going to be relying on for the next 3-4 years, to see them healthy, to see them play better, is a massive, massive step. And obviously Colton Cowser back in the lineup.
It really is. And I the White Sox series to me was still a mess.
Yeah.
The young players made so many mistakes. I mean, Heston Kjerstad getting picked off for third, Maverick Hanley tripping, running to first.
The base running was not good.
Yeah, Jackson had a couple mistakes. Like, the young guys did not play well against the White Sox. But they're winning games that they're supposed to be winning. And that's really all that matters,
Yeah.
It's still 3 wins for the standings, 2 more against Seattle. So it doesn't necessarily, at this point, matter how well they're playing, as long as they're winning the games they're supposed to be winning.
Yeah. And I want to talk about Tony Mansolino here, because you wrote a great story on the BaltimoreBanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about Tony Mansolino's path from a former player who was the son of a baseball coach, to a player at Vanderbilt, to a player in the minor leagues, to a coach in the minor league system, a manager in the minor league system, all the way up to third base coach in Baltimore, and then interim manager. This is a guy that, Danielle, grew up around the game. I mean, his dad, Doug, was a major league coach for the White Sox, the Brewers, the Tigers, the Astros. He's currently an infield coordinator in the Atlanta Braves system. Tony Mansolino has been steeped in baseball. And it's kind of funny because you can draw a few comparisons, obviously not the same star power as Matt Holliday and Jackson Holliday. But I was noticing Tony Mansolino's son one of his sons is named Jackson. And it was just reading the story reminiscent of how we saw Jackson Holliday grow up in front of us, going from somebody who was running around in the clubhouse as a little kid to starring on the baseball field with his dad watching in the stands. Obviously not the same star power, but Tony Mansolino has that kind of similar lineage in baseball.
Yeah, he's been around a game his entire life. As his dad said, even when his wife was pregnant, he was around a game. So he really grew up around us. And he saw some incredible teams. He saw that 2005 Astros team when his dad was the third base coach there. He's been in major league clubhouses throughout the country. They called him a clubhouse rat because he was always there. You could never get rid of him. And he was always getting into trouble that he shouldn't have. So he has always been around a game, always loved it. He said it, at his dining room table, him and his dad would just sit there discussing baseball. And he always kind of knew he went to Vanderbilt on a baseball scholarship. So he was a good player, but he always kind of knew that his heart, he wasn't going to be a star. That's not what his path was. His path was always to be a coach. And he rose through the coaching ranks so quickly after he retired. By the end of his 20s, he was a minor league manager. He got his first break in 2020 as a interim third base coach, and then came to Baltimore in 2021. So he is really quickly risen, but he is prepared for the game just because he's been around it his whole life. He knows what to expect.
Yeah, and I love the anecdote in there about how Ryan Mountcastle grew so close with him. And Ryan Mountcastle, for the offensive struggles he's gone through this year, he's still playing premier defensive first base. And to think back on when Ryan Mountcastle came up as a prospect, first he was looked at as a shortstop, third baseman coming out of high school. Then they move him to left field. That's a disaster. Then they move him to first base, and you're just hoping to get passable defense. And he's giving you Gold Glove caliber defense at first. And a lot of that has been due to the long hours he's put in with Tony Mansolino as the infield coordinator. And the two have grown so close. You put in the story that Ryan Mountcastle went to visit him during the offseason.
Yeah, and if you know anything about Ryan Mountcastle, he is a Florida boy at heart. He hates the cold. He loves the warm. And, he's so close to Mansolino and his family that he went through a snowstorm to go visit Mansolino. And I assumed it was for off-season training so that they could go hit grounders in the backyard like they do every single day at the stadium. If you get there early enough, you'll see them doing that, every day about 4 hours before the game starts. But nope, they just wanted to say hi to each other. Mountcastle made a snowman with his kids, talked about how you're slipping and sliding in his Uber to get there. But it just really shows the relationship that Mansolino has with these guys, that they want to spend their off season visiting a guy that they see for 200 days straight of the year.
Yeah. And in terms of who he has been as a manager, obviously, when things are going poorly, like they did in the first couple weeks of his tenure as interim manager, everyone was jumping on every little thing that he said.
Mhm.
And he was candidly honest with how he was approaching the job. I mean, his first post-game press conference as interim manager, we didn't get to talk to him before the game when Brandon Hyde was fired on May 17th. Afterwards, he said that it was a job he did not seek out. It was a job that, frankly, he was not expecting to get. A major league managerial job, he said he wasn't expecting to get for maybe 10 more years in the game. And it was not something that he wanted. He said if things were going well, he would still be the third base coach, but things have gone so poorly, and it's not a good thing for anybody. I think to get that kind of perspective of, yeah, this guy's getting a massive promotion technically, but it's something that he's not relishing because he knows that it came at the expense of his good friend Brandon Hyde and his other friend Tim Cousins. I think that was nice to hear because it shows just the kind of person that he is, that he approaches this job and he approaches his responsibility as interim manager maybe a little bit differently than some others might.
Yeah, it's not like he set out, this season to be like, we're going to get Hyde fired and I'm going to take over. Like, that's
Right.
not at all how this happened. It was, once they fired Hyde and Cousins, he was the most prepared guy for the job left behind. And I think he knew that. And he's been very, very honest about what he doesn't know. He's been very upfront about the fact that this is a group decision now. He goes into the coach's locker room every night and says, what did we do well? What do we need to do better? And how do we improve on that? He is looking for feedback from his other coaches, particularly on the pitching side, because he was not a pitcher. He's never been a pitching coach. He's never had to really manage pitchers before. So he's really leaning on the pitching coaches to understand better, what does a starter need? How long can they stay in? What does this mean if a starter's doing that? And how to manage the bullpen as well. So he's really learning very quickly on the job how to do this. And he's upfront that, this is his first time being a major league manager. He's figuring it out the best that he can.
Yeah, he is figuring this out as he goes. I mean, the first week into the job, he said, I'm fortunate to have French and Chirinos and Klimek and Ashe and all these guys around me, mentioning some of the assistants on the Orioles coaching staff. When they're making sure that we don't miss something, they're on top of it. I'm getting closer to being on top of it. That quote went a little bit viral on social media because people were looking at the Orioles struggles and saying, this guy's not on top of his stuff. In Boston, you were up there at Fenway Park when he said, this isn't Tony Mansolino managing the Baltimore Orioles and making every single decision. It's myself, it's Frenchie, it's Klimek, it's Ashe, it's Chirinos. We're all sitting there talking. I'm so new to this. I need help in a lot of ways. Those are pretty honest, pretty vulnerable responses that you don't often see from somebody who has as much control over the organization, as much power as he does. I mean, so often you see these guys take over and they have a way that they want to do things. They have, and oftentimes a headstrong approach to how they are going to manage the ball club. Tony Mansolino is not that way. He is seeing this as we are managing the Orioles by committee. He understands that he can't do this alone because his only managerial responsibilities came in 2019 in AAA. So to see that come from a big league manager, I think can be refreshing to some, but others, when they're losing, some people jump on that and say this guy's unprepared. He is out of his depth. But from our perspective, at least in the media, Danielle, it is nice to see him be as upfront with us as he has been.
And also, he is unprepared and out of his depth, and it's not his fault.
True.
It was Mike Elias who put him in his position. He did not apply for this job. He did not seek this out. So he is unprepared he said that first night he didn't sleep at all because he had all these thoughts going through his head of how was he going to do this? How was he going to organize himself? Because he only got 4 hours notice that he was taking over a major league team. So, people saying that it's true. But it is refreshing to hear that he's not going into this, all cocky, like he knows all the answers. And I keep thinking if he's like this with us, imagine what he's like with his players. He said one of the first things that he did was tell Jackson Holiday that he was going to play every day, no matter who was starting, that this was his chance to go out there and prove that he could hit lefties and righties and be an everyday player. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of improvements from Jackson, knowing that he has the full backing of his manager now.
Yeah, I think the important thing when Brandon Hyde was in his final days as Orioles manager, so many people were overreacting to what he'd say to the media. He seemed at times perhaps a little overly positive when describing his team. He would be very, very careful not to throw anybody under the bus. He'd be very, very careful not to criticize the effort from his team. But as our coworker Andy wrote about, behind the scenes, there was a lot more fire, and there was certainly a lot more criticism that was being hurled by Brandon Hyde at his players. So to me, it's not necessarily how you deal with the media. It's great that Tony Mansolino has been candid and upfront with us, and it has made our jobs easier. But it is far more important that he is honest upfront with his players. And you mentioned the Jackson Holiday example. I mean, it seems like there is more of an open line of communication. You wrote about in the story about how Ryan Mountcastle said the first real team meeting he had, because Mansolino got the job on May 17th, didn't have anything prepared, didn't know what to say to the team, kept his comments brief, but waited a while to address the team. I think it was in Minnesota.
Milwaukee.
And in Milwaukee, I should say. Yeah. And he sat the team down, and Mountcastle described it as, hey, this is crazy. Let's just go out there and play. Like, everybody knows that this is not good.
Some of that is also like Mountcastle's interpretation of it, because he is that kind of laid back dude who talks like that. But he said that was the general gist of what Mansolino was saying, that like, hey, none of us asked for this. We're all stuck in this together. Let's figure it out. We're all in this together. Was kind of his message to the team of like, we are going to get through this together. That is the only way they are going to get themselves out of this hole.
Yeah, it is such a unique situation. And Mansolino has mentioned it before. Usually when you have a managerial change, most of them happen during the off season. So you are getting somebody who was hired in October or November to put his stamp on the team, to get to know everybody behind the scenes, to come up with a plan, to hire his own staff, and to go forth into spring training with that. So to do it in the middle of the season, and also to take over a roster that has a lot higher expectations than other open managerial jobs. I mean, usually when Brandon Hyde got hired, he was taking over a rebuild. That was a complete tore down to the studs rebuild. And you don't see that in every situation, but usually when you're hiring a new manager to take over a team that is very good, you're hiring a very respected, accomplished manager. You're not hiring a new guy like you would be Tony Mansolino. So for Tony Mansolino to get this job, 1, in the middle of the season, 2, he has no major league experience, and 3, taking over a team that came into the season with playoff aspirations, and then your GM says he still believes that this team should have playoff aspirations and that they're not throwing in the towel. That is a very, very difficult situation and a unique situation for Mansolino.
Yeah, and he doesn't even know if he has a job after the season.
Right.
Probably not, in my opinion. They're probably going to go out and get that veteran manager, like you said, who will probably clear staff and hire all of his own guys. So he really has 4 months to try to turn his team around and potentially save his job.
Right.
So there's a lot at stake here for him, and it's a very odd position for him to be in.
Yeah, it would probably take a complete turnaround from this team, and we've seen signs of life, but it would take a lot for him to be able to make a case to the front office that he deserves this job in 2026 and beyond. And the Orioles may have brought in somebody who, quite frankly, might be applying for that job in 5 months' time, in John Mabry, who is added to the staff as a senior advisor to Tony Mansolino. I mean, it is just an absolute necessity to get a veteran voice in that coaching room and to have somebody who can be in Mansolino's ear offering his advice, offering his expertise, because this is somebody that has been in a lot of big league clubhouses, has been a hitting coach on several big league teams. And you got to speak to John Mabry in his first time talking to the media. What was your impression of Mabry as in addition to this coaching staff?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't think he's gonna be applying for this job. He was semi-retired, enjoying
Okay.
life in St. Louis with his kids, but he is from Maryland, he's from the Baltimore area, and I think that's kind of the only reason he came out of his semi-retirement is because how often do you get a chance to go help out your hometown team? That's special for anybody, even somebody like him who has been around baseball for so long. But he, has said he doesn't really know what his role is here yet. He's just kind of here to help out where he can, to be a voice. He knows a lot of these players. Jackson Holiday literally grew up with his son. He's coached Ryan O'Hearn. He's coached Manuel Rivera, Ramon Laureano. Like, he knows a bunch of these guys already. He's been around them. And I think they just wanted a familiar voice to come in. And they also needed help. They were down a coach after they fired Cousins. So I think the more veterans that they can have there is going to help out.
Absolutely. It matters in the clubhouse on the field to have these veteran presences, and it matters just as much to have those guys in the coaching room as well. We're going to do our minor league check-in, talk about Samuel Basallo on the other side. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, Danielle, let's talk about the Orioles' top prospect, Samuel Basallo, a guy that you have covered extensively, just 20 years old, doesn't turn 21 until August. Came into yesterday hitting .240 with 12 homers in 36 games, a .936 OPS. He hit 3 homers in the first 2 games of the month of June. The big thing for Samuel Basallo, and I know a lot of fans were looking at when Gary Sanchez went down and the Orioles brought up Maverick Hanley, and then they signed Chadwick Tromp, who made 1 appearance for the Orioles. They were saying, why is that not Samuel Basallo's spot? Basallo still needs a good amount of seasoning. Not just is he young, but he is inexperienced at the catching position, and he is inexperienced at AAA. So I think his time is coming eventually, and the Orioles still have very high hopes for him. But the time is not exactly right now.
No, and I think the thing that they had to balance with when they were going to bring him up when Gary Sanchez got hurt is he had just been injured. He hadn't really wasn't really a catcher in AAA that much this season at that time. And because they still see him as a catcher in the future, they wanted to make sure he got those reps down in AAA. And I think that you'll see him stay down there for most of the season, no matter how much power he has. I think he will probably force their hand at some point in August or September, maybe when rosters expand, to bring him up as a DH, because he does have that much power and that much potential to be able to help out a lineup in that way. But because they see him as a catcher in the future, they need him to get as many reps down there in Norfolk as he can.
Yeah, it's a difficult position to learn, and somebody who has had to learn a lot on his path up to AAA, an international signee in a system that didn't have a whole lot of high-profile international signees, was one of the first big dollar guys that the Orioles signed in that market in a long, long time, and somebody who it took a little bit of time for him to emotionally mature as well. As it would with any teenager being inserted into a different country, playing a game with a bunch of strangers. But Danielle, he's made significant strides in that area.
Yeah, I've written extensively about that, and it's been very interesting to track his progress, from spring training in 24 to spring training in 25. Just the confidence and the demeanor that you see from him in that major league clubhouse. In 24, he very much kept to himself. He was struggling a lot emotionally. Every strikeout was the end of the world to him. He would throw his bat, he would get angry, and he would go through all these emotions. And he really had to get help. He saw a psychologist. He, started writing in this notebook that helped him control his thoughts, so that he would then go back and look at later in the day as he tried to reflect back on the game. But this year in spring training, number one, it was really, really impressive to see him speaking English. and see him comfortable conversing with his teammates and having fun and just letting loose and playing pool and ping pong with some of the other Latin guys and also some of the other American guys. So he was just that much more comfortable in his surroundings. He's a lot calmer. He just kind of handles himself differently now than he did a year ago, which makes me think he really is that much closer to being mature enough to handle being a major leaguer.
Yeah, and physically he's plenty mature. I mean, he is
Oh, yes.
6'4". He is incredibly strong. He stands out on the field anytime that he is doing work with other catchers. His size is just such a standout feature about him, and
Yeah.
his power is just incredible. There is or will be little question about his ability to translate at the plate once he gets up to the big leagues. Obviously, the catching is going to take some time. I mean, he got only 27 games in AAA last year. You mentioned the injuries that he had, elbow inflammation during spring training, so he was limited then. They start out the season with him mostly at DH this year. Really only has 9 games behind the plate this year in Norfolk. So that is a difficult position to learn and is one that is going to take a lot of seasoning. But there's no question he is going to be an above average hitter at some point in the near future in the big leagues.
Most definitely. And one of my favorite things about watching him hit is the noise. Like the crack of his bat is so loud because he has that much power. He's just really impressive, and he's going to be impacting his team for a long, long time.
Absolutely. It could be a few months before we see him, but I think that's very much still on the table that we could see Samuel Basallo up in the big leagues at some point in 2025. Danielle, thanks so much for hopping on the Banner Baseball show. She is out of her sling. She is back at the ballpark. That is the exciting part about all of this. At @D_Allentuck is her handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Please like, rate, review, subscribe anywhere that you get your podcasts. And of course, subscribe to the Baltimore Banner for $1 for 6 months to get all of Danielle's work. Andy Kuska, John Mioli, Kyle Goon. We've got you covered for Orioles baseball as they continue their West Coast swing. And then, Danielle, we are back in Baltimore just as the heat is going to arrive for us. Are you excited?
Yeah, I love summer.
This is the best time of year. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Danielle Allentuck, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.